2, 1, and we are live. Whenever you are, wherever you are, thank you for joining the Design of Everyday People, where I speak to senior designers from all over the world and you get to literally ask them anything. So stick around till the end where you get to get your questions answered. But let's make this session as interactive as possible and tell me, where are you watching this from? Just drop a comment in LinkedIn or YouTube or wherever you're live streaming this from. And let's see who's in the building at the moment. So before we get started, okay, we are on LinkedIn Live. Uh, Let me just mute that. Sorry, everybody. Okay, let's take this off. And yeah, before we start, I would like to tell the audience about what's going on this week. And I'm sure you've all heard about it. It's the LA wildfires. An estimated 88,000 people in LA are under evacuation from the wildfires. Over 12,000 structures have been destroyed. Many are actually people's homes. So the design content creator community are teaming up to help folks who have lost their homes. And we need everybody's help, your help, the audience help, the people that are watching, and the folks that are online. Each of us will be highlighting a family who have lost their homes in the fires, and we'll be asking you to donate during this live stream. If you haven't noticed that, there's a QR code in the top left. We'll be doing non-stop programming for this entire week and likely to the next week, from teaching designers how to get hired and how to make money, including portfolio presentations, case studies, storytelling, whiteboarding, managing side gigs, salary negotiations, and talks like this about AI with industry leaders, design execs, and some of the best course creators on Maven. We will be making thousands of dollars worth of design content for absolutely free. So please give what you can give this week. And you can donate by scanning that QR code. I'll also put that on screen because I know that it's very small. So you can scan that QR code right there, and I'll leave the one in the top left throughout the event. And if you found this helpful, please consider donating. There's a suggested donation of $25, but of course, you can just give what you can. It will directly help the families affected. So the funds will go directly to the family. So scan that QR code, and I would also drop the link in the chat as I do it now while I'm live on air. And also the link to all the further programming that all the awesome designers are doing to help the families that are in need. So we really appreciate everybody's help. I'll leave that in the top left hand corner of the QR code throughout the event, so you can always access it. And of course, I've just dropped the link there as well. So I just want to say thank you very much to everybody. I should drop that in YouTube as well. Okay, so it's already in YouTube. So thank you so much. Uh, and let me pause that and let's get back to today's programming. All right. Okay, cool. The buttons are just kind of messing me up these days, guys. So bear with me, bear with me, bear with me. Okay. So welcome to this talk today called How Designers Can Use Gen AI. I'll start with quick introductions. If you don't know me, I'm Chris, the founder of UX Playbook, but before that, a self-taught designer struggling to get into UX, and now I teach designers and spend time helping them navigate a fuzzy UX career and turn it into focus with UX Playbook, from building your first portfolio to leading your first design team. But that's enough about me. I am joined today by Lennart Nacke. I probably messed it up. Sorry, Lennart. You tell me when you get out here. A PhD in digital game development, a professor and university chair of the University of Waterloo. So let's get Lennart out here and see how he's doing. Hey man, did I get your name correctly or did I just completely mess it up?
That was pretty good. Yeah, I'm quite impressed. I gotta say, I get like sometimes I get introduced here locally in Canada, and then it's just like Nacke is definitely wrong. So Nacke is definitely very close to how it's pronounced. Yeah, I like that.
Okay, okay.
Thanks.
Yeah, no worries. So, for the folks that don't know you, apart from what I just gave, do you want to tell them a bit about yourself?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, thank you so much for having me on, Chris, and thank you so much for doing this to raise money for the folks who've lost their homes in the LA wildfires. Big shout out to Hang. I saw him in the comments. Thank you for being an inspiration there, Hang, as well. It's absolutely lovely to see that kind of support, and I do hope everyone's going to support this. It's a dire times here. I do know the world is facing a very serious era that we're in. You know, the climate change and everything is causing a lot of problems that we just have to deal with. So it's great if we can support this somehow. One of the things that I wanted to say about myself is, yeah, I just got recently appointed University Research Chair here at the Stratford School for Interaction Design and Business at the University of Waterloo, where I train junior UX designers and UX researchers in the craft really of how do you design better experiences. My PhD was actually in the area of digital game development. I wrote a PhD on the scientific evaluation of interactive entertainment. And so that's user experience for video games and other highly interactive scenarios where we have some entertainment value in there. So this was my path into UX. And then I just became much more obsessed with UX. And most of you that are on LinkedIn also know me talking about my other skill set, which is academic writing, because I have a lot of graduate students, a huge growing research group of graduate students that are quite excited and really interested in learning more about some of this stuff. You can also see on this side here, the book I've written, Games User Research. I'm one of the co-editors of that book. A really exciting book. If you're ever interested in learning more about video games and what goes into the UX process of building them, check out this book at Oxford University Press. Very proud of that. Pretty good book to get you started. That's, I think, the basics about me. So yeah, you might know me from talking about some of that UX stuff, as well as talking about scientific academic writing. And recently, you have also heard more in the last year as our research group has shifted focus a little bit on research within generative AI. And so we do a lot of research within generative AI to kind of see what it does to academia as well. Because as you know, in academia, we write a lot, but we also review a lot. So having an assistant, having an automated system that evaluates at the level of PhD knowledge what we can do, which is what OpenAI promised us, is kind of an interesting research question. So we're kind of thrilled to be working in that space. And then, of course, what comes with that is also this idea of how can UX designers now use that to become better at the process of UX designing. So that's why we're here today. Excited to get some questions from everyone. And again, thanks, Chris, for having me.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's a good place to start. But before we do that, just wanted to say thank you for the donation. Do let us know, because there is no like thing that lets me know. I didn't hook that up, so do let us know if you decided to donate. We really thank you from the bottom of our hearts. On behalf of the family that's affected. So thank you very much. Okay, so let me just start this conversation with another reminder for the audience, which is, as we talk about this, please drop your questions in the comments below so we can revisit them, because sometimes something comes to your head and you forget about it if you don't ask right away. So do that, and we will get to as many questions at the end as possible. So to start this, I had some questions for myself, which is like, is AI hype? How useful is it? Should we be scared? And is it going to take all our jobs? Maybe, maybe not, right? But like, I think the biggest question is what you alluded to, which is like, how can designers really use it? And to be
Mm.
completely honest, I've definitely have not been utilizing it as much as possible. So I don't really know, and I can't really speak to that. But that's why you're here, because you can speak to it way more than I can. So I think maybe we should start with the why behind it. I know you either posted yesterday or today about like, why should UX designers use AI in their process. So why don't we start there, if that's okay, Lennart?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think that's the thing that I posted this morning, which was this idea of why even bother with it. So the first thing that comes to mind here is, of course, thinking about that there's, and you hear that in any sector. It's not just design, it's any sector. We hear that as academics. We hear that in just regular jobs as well. This whole fear that everyone has that they are bringing into 2025, which is currently touted as the year where we're getting autonomous agents, where we're getting agents doing agentic behavior, how it's called, with artificial intelligence. So that means a little bit more of automated autonomous processing. If you ever done anything on Zapier or Make.com or any of these automation platforms, you have an idea of what that means. If you're a programmer, like my background is computer science, so you know what that means. It's like pretty much stuff that was to this point only available to somebody with programming knowledge is now available to everyone. That is a blessing and a curse, because it's a blessing because now you have that, what many people label superpower. It's not a superpower. It's just like a way that you can now leverage technology more efficiently than it was before, because before you need to go to a programmer, converse with them and get that stuff done. And sure, I've seen the studies as well. It's still, don't worry, programmers, it's still more efficient to be a programmer. You still know better to this point how to structure programs. They will run better, so nobody's coming for your jobs yet. But one of the things that we see is the kind of prototyping that we would do at a computer science program, let's say in second year for undergrad. That's still pretty messy, but it works, right? Like, it's little apps that you can build that work, and you can do that same stuff with Cursor AI. You can do it with what is it called? Codium Windfall, I think. Gotta look that up again. Tommy just posted about that yesterday, that he's totally into it, but it's from Codium. And Cursor was the big one that everyone got excited about. So these are pretty much large language models that are being used on code, right? So you can actually use it on parts of the code to generate the code. And then all you got to do is know how to put that in your local development environment and deploy it so that you can create apps. You just install Xcode on your Mac. You build the tool in Cursor. Cursor will create the code for you. You can feed it references to libraries for UI design. You can, like, all of the gold standards, essentially. You can reference all of that, and it will take those instructions and will actually make a really great looking UI for you without you knowing what's actually going on in there. So it's a pretty great time to be able to do that, where before, a lot of it was about mock-ups and doing stuff really quickly and spending a lot of time on that. And now you can go to a prototype in pretty much half a day, less time than that if you're experienced, just a couple of hours even. And you can actually build the app from scratch if you can describe it in natural language. So it's an interesting shift that we're seeing in skill sets from, as a designer, you needed to be able to learn Figma, right? Like, or any sort of tool. Adobe before that, it was all the Adobe tools. You need to become really good at that, create little wireframes, make sure stuff gets built quickly. And now, if you have a good vocabulary, so for those senior level designers, let's say the product manager on a design team, they are usually pretty good because they've described, designs for their team for a long time. So if you're very explicit in describing a good design, you can use that skill for a large language model. And if you have the vocabulary again to describe all the things, you can, in an iterative process, actually build a tool. And then, as long as you have the knowledge on how to put that in the right coding environment, deploy it, you can build the thing. So you could build an app on the App Store in a day, right? Like, if you know how to do it. And again, zero programming knowledge required, zero computer science background required. You just do it. And the only thing keeping you from it is that little understanding how to actually get the thing done. Because you see a lot of influencer things that are just like, oh yeah, just build the thing, but then it just stops at building the thing. So now you've generated code. So what? This was a problem when I was an undergrad for computer science as well. There's a lot of Java tutorials, but it's like how do you even get Java to run? You needed to set up the runtime environment and everything like that. And like, not a lot of tutorials actually took care of that. So I kind of had to learn all of that. And then the deployment. So once you have a Java applet, like how do you make it run in a browser? How do you put it on a phone? How do you put it like somewhere? How do you make these things executable files that actually work and run just by clicking on it? That last bit is actually the most important bit if you have an entrepreneurial mindset, at least. And let's say you wanted to sell some of these things, you could, right? But yeah, so that's kind of, those are the skills you still need. The rest AI can do for you, the in between. That's kind of cool.
So, okay, so in that sense, it sounds like, the line between design and development are fairly blurred, but
Yeah.
for a lot of, I guess, designers, maybe they're on teams and they have separate development teams. What would I guess, I mean, they can, yes, prototype something really quickly, but they really probably won't be, quote unquote, allowed to launch things to production, or to update the code base. So they would still need to execute their design process. And you mentioned, explaining something, in natural language can help with that. Do you have any sort of back pocket or secret prompts or secret things that you can share us about prompt writing that could help a designer sort of navigate this process or make that process more efficient? Or what do you use, or what have you been, teaching others to use?
Actually, I'm gonna jump. So 2 things I want to talk about there. First thing is, everyone, there's people that have built huge followings by sharing their prompt lists and all that stuff. Where I'm just, and there was this whole gold rush time when people grew like hundreds of thousands of followers on social media, when they're just like sharing their prompting process and whatnot. And really, it's not that hard. And the models have gone better. If you ever dabbled around with the new Gemini Advanced, the thing is really good. You don't need to be an arcane prompt engineer to make sure that thing runs well. It gets what you want it to do. So what you need to embrace is a little bit of that engineering mindset of tip the cow over and see if it falls. Kind of. But you kind of want to see like, okay, can I play with this a little bit and see if I can tweak it, and then just iteratively build it, just like you would in code. In code, then some designers might not know that, but if you're like a technical person and you're building a program, the way it usually goes is you're not perfect. So you might know what a for loop is, you might know, how you want to iterate over an array or something like that, and then you put that in. But to actually see it in practice, you have to compile it. So hit like a compile button in the environment, and then it will output something. And then you look at that output, debugging, right? You look at that output, look at eventual errors, take those errors, refine the code. So it's like this iterative cycle of, okay, this is what I'm doing, this is what it does. And that's because we're not computers. We don't natively understand the computer as well. Some people get pretty close, some engineers are like computer mind, right? And so they can understand that. But the thing that's quite interesting is you don't need that abstraction layer anymore. You can actually, work with the output, because the output will be produced in front of you as you're building that. And then you'll get an error. And what you can do is you just copy and paste that compiler error, the debug error, whatever comes out of it, which again might be a little bit scary for somebody doing that the first time, but it's really quite easy. Copy and paste that over to Cursor or any of the other tools that you use, and then prompt it to essentially work on that error and fixing that error, and it will fix that error. And then slowly you go through that. So I guess over time you kind of learn a little bit more about like what it means to code that stuff. But it's definitely one way to do it. It's just that iteration mindset. Now, the second thing I want to say, all of the better large language models have complete vision capabilities by now. So even if you're not a great explainer, if you're not product manager level and you're designing this stuff, you could also sketch it, right? Like we've seen that. We've all seen those X threads or whatnot, where people say, I just went from like sketching it on a napkin to having this full program, which is like looks like wizardry. It's not, right? Like you can literally feed it to that. You can even do a multi-step process, right? So what I usually do is, I'd sketch it out. I pick a screenshot of it, feed that image to the AI. I get the AI to output that in a format that I can input to a vector program. So it's usually Mermaid or this other UML type code that you can actually import. And you can import it in a simple program like Draw.io, which is free, or XCaliDraw. So those are free programs that will usually take Mermaid code, and they will generate the boxes for you, essentially. And yeah, they'll be messy, they won't be great, but you'll have your boxes in place. And then even with the most basic design knowledge, you can turn those into prototypes. You can turn those into wireframes. Then once you have your wireframe, you can screenshot that, get the wireframe into Cursor or a similar tool, and then help it to create the UI code. Of course, you got to reference the UI libraries. Let's say you're using Swift or something like that. You got to reference the right UI libraries. And then you say, I just want you to build this interface, and it will come pretty close, surprisingly, right? So you're kind of going from this thing where you're heavily tool dependent. You have Figma or Miro or any of the other cool tools, or what was it, Adobe. Anyways, yeah, so it's a bunch of, I keep forgetting, it's always like when I'm on the spot, like I just don't remember the names, whatever. But yeah, there's a bunch of tools that you had that took you from, okay, I can sketch the vector drawing kind of boxes, and now I can make them interactive. I think Figma is definitely the one that most people use, because yeah, you can make it clickable, right? So you can, and before that it was, again, names escape me, but so there's a bunch of tools that let you do those wireframes, but then usually they stop and they don't let you make it interactive. Framer, I think, has added that AI capability as well. And so with Framer, you can turn it into a website as well really quickly and all that stuff. So essentially, yes, you could still do that and you can pay the high premium for that. Or if you're, let's say, a cash-strapped designer in a country where you're just kind of trying to, earn the skills and make it work, you don't need to pay all that money for these, very premium level AI-based UI tools. You can literally get something like Draw.io, which is free. You can sketch out the boxes. You can put it in an AI. Sure, you got to pay for the AI. That's the downside. But you could use something like Poe.com, where you can have different language models, or you just pay per use or stuff like that. And then you feed it in there. You get your code back. And then with that code, then, of course, yeah, for the coding program, so Cursor will cost you a monthly, and the other coding tools will cost you a monthly too. But again, it's like $20, right? So just think about that. If you would have to hire a programmer or somebody, it'd be more, right? So it is definitely worth the investment if you want to do rapid prototyping. And then what you get is actually a prototype. So the prototype now doesn't just live in Figma, and you can only do it in Figma. It's kind of like, okay, now we got to get it from Figma into the coder's hands. But you're literally skipping the high fidelity prototype, essentially. Usually you go lo-fi, napkin, whatever, then you go wireframe, mid-fi, and then you go into the high fidelity prototype. Now you don't need that anymore. You don't need a high fidelity prototype. You can just bake it directly into code, and then you have it in the code base. And sure, it might be messy, but you can give that to a coder and be like, here, I wrote the thing for you. Now you just add your functions, make it more efficient, whatever. So it can really speed up the process, I think, for front-end development. So we call that like front-end, back-end development on the coding side, right? And what you're doing is essentially you're taking care of the first iteration of front-end development for the coder. So the designer is now kind of becoming more entrenched in the development process. Kind of cool if you think about it. It's like really, we are getting superpowers in a way, right? So I like that.
I guess a lot. So from my limited knowledge, because I haven't played around with like Cursor, VO or version 0, or all of these other like tools that Lovable or whatever it is, like things that you can build stuff off. Aren't they just designed more for developers than they are for designers? Like, why can't it be like Sketch or Figma? Or the better example is probably Framer, where you're actually still playing on an infinite canvas, and you're just like creating artboards, and then you're actually designing. And then I guess me as a designer, I don't care about the code. I would only want to like see under the hood if things are broken, and then from there, try to like visually figure out the interaction, how this really works. So imagine me actually building a high fidelity prototype, as you were saying, but it actually work, right? Like locally, without me messing around with the code. Why do you think why do you think that we still need to actually have a look at the code? Why could we not just build without it, or at least like export it and then figure out if it works somewhere else? Or is it just, why is that part of the thing that people, like designers or people that don't code, so afraid of? Like, it's just a bunch of letters and digits on a screen. Like, why isn't that eradicated yet? And will it ever be eradicated?
That's a fantastic question, Chris. And this is actually something that I see a lot with our undergraduate students as well, specifically because I teach in the Faculty of Arts. And so there's this inherent fear that students have of programming, of code, of technical things, which is absolutely unfounded, right? I think it is because at some level, maybe some of them have tried it and then they got alienated by, okay, it is pretty complex once you figure that out. But really you don't even know what's actually going on there. If you use Lovable or if you use Windsurf, is actually the name of the Codium product. So Windsurf is the newest and probably best one currently because the pricing is also beating Cursor. So if you use Codium's Windsurf, you essentially just prompt it, right? You prompt it right there. You have it in natural language prompting, and then it will spit out the code. And then you're mistaken if you think you actually need to know what's going on in the code. All you need to do is just copy and paste that thing over into your actual coding environment, Xcode or Visual Studio or whatever. So that's the only thing you got to learn. It's like, how do I execute a a program in Visual Studio or in Xcode? And you can learn that without fear in like half an hour on YouTube. Like there's lots of really, really nice people, friendly people that will like very warmly walk you through that process. It's not rocket science. It's not hard. It's just like configuring Figma with plugins. Like it's no different than learning like a tool like Figma, right? So yeah, but then you kind of have to handle that code part a little bit, and you have to get over that fear. And then all you got to do is just copy and paste it back and forth. So like you get the error from the code thing, you paste that error into Windsurf, and then Windsurf will fix that error for you, and you'll get that update. So really you're not actually involved in the coding process, so you're kind of removed from that. And so I think maybe the difference is that whole tangible aspect, whereas in Figma you go in there, you wiggle the box. The only thing is wiggling the box. You get to wiggle the box, which is what Figma gives you and what Framer gives you. You get to wiggle the box with your interactive prototype. You cannot do that with the other approach. So that's, if you live for that stuff, I can't change that. You're gonna always need to have a tool like that lets you wiggle the boxes as you're executing stuff.
I like the term wiggling the box, and I think I do live for that.
TM.
There's one part of me that does live for that, yeah. But there is a line. I can't wiggle the box for 10 hours a day anymore. I think I used to be able to, but not anymore. I mean, maybe that is a potential gap in the market where I could wiggle the box, but then it do something else as well. Like, I wonder if there's like a transition period I'm specifically talking about designers, where it's like, it was Sketch or Photoshop or Figma. It's like, I'm building a website, and then they had all these plugins that's like, oh no, you can turn it into a real website. Then Framer was like, no, we're going to make the pivot. You're going to actually be able to actually launch a website. And then maybe the next phase of design tools specifically is like, no, you can wiggle the box and look, it's a working application. Of course, it's not going to be as good as the other products where you actually copy and pasting code and like debugging it. And then there's like platform lock-ins with things like Framer. You can't export that to a different service. That's exciting. I'm just throwing it out there and thinking about, is there a space for that kind of AI tool that makes it like way more visual in development than just the raw inputs? Because anyway, I digress. So I wanted to ask you, like, we mentioned a lot of AI tools out there. Do you have a specific stack when you're thinking about, okay, I want to build something, as a professor, designer, just someone that's like interested in building products? What would your stack be? Have you tried it? How do you think about that stuff?
Yeah, I think our friend Kim Alban, who also talks about design and AI design and stuff like that. I love what Loisel says there. So one of the things I think that she talks about quite a lot is how some of the existing products that we know and love, like Miro and Figma, have integrated AI in that process. And I am really a fan of what's happening there as well. Like specifically Miro, one of my favorite tools for a long time. And I know FigJam has kind of like eaten away at that dominance position a little bit, because Figma is just everywhere and everyone loves Figma. You're not allowed to not love Figma if you're a designer. Okay. But Miro is nice too. I do like Miro, really appreciate what they've done to the product. And like one of the things for us that was interesting was the whole card sorting thing, right? Like, so card sorting used to be a skill, used to be a long process where you do an open or closed sort, you get ideas, and it's, for those of you who know, it's all about information hierarchy. and it's trying to come up with different information structure. And based on this example, let me illustrate an interesting dilemma that we're in for UX researchers as well, because now Miro does automated card sorting for you. You can, tell it to sort it into categories, and it will try its best to semantically analyze what's on the post-it notes, and it will try to put the post-it notes into clusters so that you can see, like if you're building a menu, what should be the submenus and whatnot, which is, a really fantastic thing. It cuts down the time that it would take to run a card sort with 10, 15 people a lot, and it makes that much, much faster. So, but then the question is, as a true UX evangelist, you should be skeptical at that point, because we've been taught this entire time, we got to get the data from the user. We got to get the data from real people. And now this is, I think, one of the interesting questions, or one of the interesting struggles that we see in UX, and you might have seen it with the layoffs of the UX designers as well, because I think the product teams were kind of using some of that argumentation there as well. Essentially, if you have the question really is, if you have an LLM, and the LLM, it's a large language model, it's trained on a lot of users, how close is that to asking a lot of users? Because it's kind of averaging over a lot of users, input that came into that model. And then there was this outcry when synthetic users came about and said, we're just building synthetic users, so you can run user tests without users. And every UX person said, you cannot. This is not UX anymore. This is like SX, maybe synthetic experience or something like that. So you're kind of in that weird spot of, okay, we have this synthetic bit here, and we can, definitely make some decisions with that. I'm sure there's a lot of people building navigation menus just with the averaging that they get from Miro, or a tool that allows you, I think Figma has the same thing, or FigJam, that allows you to do that kind of clustering and the kind of hierarchies that you can get there. Now, the question is, how much do you like that, and how much better is that? I think we need more studies in that, really scientifically. How much better is that menu going to perform than if you were to run that study in a real user research study, where you invite 15 people or whatever over, and you do an actual card sort, and you look at the results from the card sort, you write your standard UX report, you come up with the best guess. Now, the interesting thing that, and this is specifically for anyone interested in user research, that you have there is the user researcher always makes a judgment call as well. They're never completely removed from the process. So you use actual human data, but you also use the expertise of the UX researcher to then make the judgment call for, this is how we want the actual menu to look like. Okay, and that's usually great, and it's worked for a lot of companies really well. But then, is it a good enough approximation if we are letting AI do the thing for us in Miro or FigJam? How good is that? So you can see, Chris, it's a tricky spot that we're in. Like, how can we use these tools in a way that still feels real, that still feels UX-y? Is that a word? It's now enough for us that we can deal with it. And I know that some of my friends that are professional designers are all looking into this. Like, how can we make the maximum use out of these LLMs and these AI functionalities without betraying our trade, without betraying the UX design, the idea that we need to have user data? Because on the one hand, we all want to be more efficient, we all want to get more done, but on the other hand, we should never sacrifice the quality that we get from a real user study. And I mean, same for us as scientists, right? Like, I cannot stop evaluating humans, because that's the nature of my research. I want to evaluate humans. I am very interested in what's going on here and what's going on your face, and like all of these processes. And I would not stop doing that and just all of a sudden start running simulations with synthetic users, and that would just replace my user studies. I would not do that as a scientist. So, I know it's different if you work in a company and you got tight production deadlines, and I think that might have been some of the pressure that has worked towards the firing of a lot of UX people over the last years, where people are just like, tight budget, we don't have time to do proper research, proper user testing, and so let's just go with the best average route. What future will that leave us with in terms of products? I mean, that's the future we're headed right now. It's an interesting future to kind of see, will we all end up with half working broken software in 5 to 10 years? I don't know. I hope not. But it is one of the risks that could come from that, sort of taking this shortcut there.
Yeah, I think with everyone with the ability to launch something, which is great, like democratizing making software and launching products. But also, there's going to be a hell of a lot of crappy things available because everybody could do
Mhm.
it. So not everybody should do it, or at least necessarily good at it as well. So that would be quite
Well,
an interesting thing. Yeah. So sorry, Lennart,
here,
go.
here's a question for you then. If you look at a tool like Wizard, right, like or
Yep.
Uizard or whatever you want to pronounce it, I think it's Wizard. So if you take Wizard and you look at, Wizard is a tool, by the way, for anyone watching, never heard of it. It's an AI tool that lets you create wireframes and mockups literally with a prompt, right? Like it is essentially, it was the first one that came out that was 100% AI for UI designers, not UX designers, UI designers, right? And so, yes, it took care of the UI and it was trained on, I'm guessing, I don't work at Wizard, but I'm guessing it was trained on different designs and websites, and it would come up with mockups essentially of those designs. And then you could edit it. You could still wiggle the box after, but it would still give you that. So the question is, now, a lot of these large language models, they always average to the best, right? Like they always average to the middle. What does that do to creative innovation, right? Like if you actually want to create something that is unique and stands out, and then of course people could make that argument, you don't ever want to have something that stands out because we have UI standards for a reason, so that people don't get confused with our websites and our products and our kiosks, whatever user interface you're designing. If you deviate too much from the norm, you'll be creating something that's not usable, and that's also not the point of creating a good interface. A good interface needs to feel intuitive, right? Like it needs to feel like I can work with it right away. So yeah, definitely one of those things to think about. Like what is your take on Wizard and these tools, and that it all kind of looks the same? I don't know if they're a sponsor of yours and if you can talk freely about them, but it's just, they're not my sponsor, so I can talk freely about them, and I can say that I think it's interesting, but there's definitely a bit of same, right? Like a bit of like, I don't feel the same empowerment I feel than if I use Figma and I just start from scratch. Sure, it takes longer, but is that taking... So the question we all have to ask ourselves as AI takes over our lives and everyone becomes super efficient, superhuman, and so productive, is like, what are we sacrificing for this increase in speed and productivity? Because, there is a nice aspect of creativity that is slowing down, that is drinking the coffee in the park and getting inspired, that, companies like Apple and others that have been built on something like Steve, if you read the biography, used to love to go on these walks and just kind of talk through things. That's like a cognitive process of talking through things and coming up with things as you're discussing them and as you're reflecting on them. But if you're now like, go, wizard this stuff, come up in the afternoon with full interface, get this all done in 2 hours instead of 10. With this fast-paced environment, like, where do we end up? What do we get out of this? I think I can say that as an outsider. I think it's different if you have the pressure to sell product all the time and you kind of living depends on making more money. And specifically in the US, where next week everything is going to be focused, sorry if anyone's watching this, but everything's going to be focused on more money. The divide between poor and rich is going to get bigger. Sorry, that's what's going to be. So, I think maybe that mindset will take even more precedence because people will be pushed more to individualism, making the most money, making the most out of their time. But that will also, I think, heavily burn out a lot of people. As any creator knows, we all have faced burnout because we all kind of at some point hopped on that bandwagon of, if we can just do more in less time, and then we probably burned out at some point. I think we've all been there.
Yeah, I think the using tools to create UI question is interesting. I've played around with a lot of the tools, just because this is what I'm doing now, and I mean, none of them are perfect, as you said. It's kind of like it just spits out something that it thinks it makes sense, but there's a lot of love it needs. But also, I would say it really depends on the purpose of what you're trying to build. Like there are systems, patterns, things that people are used to, but maybe the thing that you're making is not that. If it is that, there's still kind of that human input element of like, well, what does the data say? What should we test? How many different versions, right? So I think like just kind of generating UI is not the magic. The magic would be like, okay, after you generate the UI, can you then launch it and launch 10 different versions, and then get that data in a matter of weeks, maybe 1 week, depending on your traffic, and then come back and then review it with me, and then let me sign off on the next decision. And then, so zooming out a bit, so like these capabilities are just one part of the toolbox that can help you run faster. Because what's happening now with especially with like corporate companies, 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 people, it's like, I don't know, how long did Google decide a shade of blue on a button? Like, it's
True.
just ridiculous, right?
Hmm.
So not to say that, that didn't increase their revenue by X%, whatever the ridiculous number is, but I'm saying that, these teams in there, and then if they could run faster, would, enterprise software like Salesforce be just much pleasurable to use, or just be optimized for personalization based on the user? So there's just a lot of these questions out there that I think there's more good, hopefully, than just a race for efficiency. Although we all see that, right? But I think that, yeah, maybe we were talking about the designer and the developer lines are blurred. Now with some of the other tools, maybe the designer and product manager line is blurred, where you get to have some of these decisions kind of laid out in front of you, and you can go the other spectrum, or maybe all of those product building lines are blurred now because everybody can speak and write relatively well, right? We do it every day, so yeah, I don't know, and that's a really good question that you brought up. Yeah.
I think it's an interesting area that we're going into, especially looking at Rebecca's comment there about shit in, shit out. I think there is a space for solopreneurs or individual creators where AI can be really empowering. And yes, yeah, if a client pays you less, then they'll just get more AI. If they pay you more, they get more of your individual feedback, right? So I think you can scale better. You can go through these processes of being able to work what you usually needed a full design team for, work through things where you needed to get feedback, brainstorm, get more ideas about that stuff. I think you can work through that quicker and by yourself. You don't need the teams anymore because AI can help you replace some of that part. I think Rebecca's right when she says you still need the lingo, and this is true for anything that you do with AI. I still find the same thing when I work with writing stuff. I can get much better prompts if I know exactly what rhetorical device I'm using. For example, one of the things that every creator on LinkedIn or whatever uses is called an antithesis. This is a rhetorical device where you've heard it before. It's like, stop doing this, start doing that. Not this, but that. Is like, antithesis is the most powerful rhetorical device you can use in social media writing. But you might not know that. And so you're just like writing, I just need a viral hook or whatever. And the AI won't know exactly what to do with that. It will not create an actually good viral hook. But if I prompt it, I need an antithesis about this particular thing, I have my viral hook right there. It might not go viral, but it'll be a great hook for the piece that I'm about to write. And just by having the vocabulary to prompt for the things that I need, that's the real trick. And so when Rebecca says you still need design lingo, she's absolutely right. Being able to prompt for the things that you need for that design space will actually empower you to get better results and be able to get, the things that you need. So I do think the empowerment for solo designers, solopreneur designers, whatever you want to call them, designpreneurs, whatever the word is of the day, that will have that power, right? Like we can see more of that turnaround. And this actually might be an interesting thing because maybe we're shifting, and I think this is something we see for work in general. I think we're looking at a future that's actually quite interesting, where we're having fewer companies, fewer salaried people working for the man, where we're probably looking at a future 100 years down the line where maybe we're all individual companies, right? Like maybe that's just how it's going to be. Everyone is sort of a freelancer. Maybe I'm being like completely out the window here, but I can see that future happening as something where, people might be more inclined to be empowered based on their output, and they might work with different bosses based on projects. There might be a space for that. You can see it by this trend of the creator movement and the entrepreneurship, solopreneurship, whatever you want to call it, that we've seen on LinkedIn, that is definitely becoming more and more popular over the last couple of years, right? So there is a change afoot that we just need to be aware of, and that we need to be prepared to work with somehow. So being smart enough to handle that, I think, is the best way. And so running away from AI, running away from code, that's not going to do it. So two things you got to do is you got to get better at languaging. There's just no way out of it, because the way that these models start is they're trained on language. So if you can't tell somebody what to do, that's not a good future for you. So you need to get better at articulating yourself about the thing that you want to do. That's step number one. Step number two is you also need to not be afraid of a little bit of technical sides of things like code and stuff like that. Specifically, when you're an artist, when you're a designer, the designers that are going to rock the boat the most and that are really going to have an amazing future are usually the ones that are not afraid of infusing their craft with a little bit of technical knowledge. Nobody says you need to understand compiler theory or something like that. That's too much, right? But just being able to touch Visual Studio and not be afraid of it, I think goes a long way. I think that's actually the product that probably Tommy is working on. I have a feeling he's working on something like that. He's just got, who knows? I'm oracling here, but I think that's that's the empowerment that we probably see from designers happening, that designers get a little bit more technical, but that also should also mean that people that are more technical also need to infuse their vocabulary. So the lone engineer that sits somewhere and that cannot articulate is going to be a bit of a problem. So they also need to get better at the English language or whatever language they speak, so that they can articulate the thing that they want. So I think the dark view of AI is it takes all of our jobs and our minds, and we don't do anything ourselves. The bright view of AI is it actually makes us better at communicating, because now we need to talk to a robot and not to a human. The benefit of a human is they have empathy. They can understand us even if we muzzle, if we don't articulate things properly, if our diction sucks. Humans will look past that. AI, not so much. AI probably at some point will be good enough to look past that, but right now, it will generate better results if we're able to clearly talk to it. So there is an absolute huge benefit in learning how to communicate, and I think that could be seen as a huge advantage. Yeah, and as we're one thing more, because I can see some people that are anti-AI jumping in right now. Like, you're supporting the LA wildfires, but do you know how much water an AI query costs, right? I don't know if you're aware of this, but pretty much an image generation on DALL-E is just like pouring a full water bottle on the floor. That's how much water gets, the environmental cost of AI is actually quite high. So one of the things that I would recommend for somebody that wants to use AI more ethically is, why don't you, as part of your practice, if you use a lot of image generators, for example, if you use a lot of generative AI in your work, make it a thing maybe to also think about, and maybe this shouldn't be on the individual, but actually on the companies. I think OpenAI and other companies should not worry about their bottom line as much, but they should actually worry about donating to plant trees and stuff like that. Because on the one hand, you have to be aware that everything you do with AI has a huge environmental impact. So as you're doing, and as you find yourself comforting in that, maybe it's time to think about, okay, maybe we should put in some donations. What about, putting in $20 donation, it's tax deductible, towards planting a tree somewhere in the world? That will go a long way by the oxygen and stuff that's being produced based on that. That will go a long way towards, on the other end, what you're taking out of the AI. So thinking about some of these ethical quarrels that should be part of the discussion, but are often just completely left out of the discussion, I think is important. Because, yeah, AI is super power hungry and resource hungry, and that does have an impact on the planet, of course.
Yeah, that's a fantastic recommendation, right? If you're really worried about what the damage of energy consumption with AI, then you definitely should do something about it.
Yeah.
Like, from the individual level up, because I think that companies would always look towards their bottom line. They have shareholders. They basically just need to make a profit. Otherwise, why would they exist? They're not in it
Yeah.
for the good. OpenAI has said, "Hey, no, we're a for-profit company now. So it's like, okay, well, kind of
They've
like,
always been a for-profit company. Come
yeah,
on.
I know they
They've
pretended
always
for a
been
long
for-profit.
time, but it's different,
Nah.
right? When they admit it, right? Then you're like,
Yeah.
okay, fine, right? But when you admit it, you're just like, God damn
Yeah.
it, dudes. So, but yeah, if you're, whoever left that comment, if you're, actually for this, then I think you should, do something about it, right? Yeah,
True.
that's the thing I wanted to say. Another thing I actually wanted to say, which is like, I think the future of like everybody, like solo people being their own companies, it's gonna happen. And I heard Naval speak about this. He calls it the atomization of work, where gig workers, freelancers, solopreneurs, creators, whatever it is, like the workforce is actually shrinking. Where like bigger companies are basically breaking off, or smaller companies are taking lunch money from the big company in a tiny thing, and then there's this kind of big swallow up of these companies, and then something else happens. So like there's always going to be chance for bigger companies to get smaller, and then smaller companies to prop up again. And he gives this great analogy of how Hollywood works, where there's a director, a bunch of actors, the stunt team, the visual effects team, whatever. They're not employed by the studio forever, for all eternity. They don't have a labor contract with them. What they do is just, hey, we are making Lord of the Rings 15. Can we then just come together, and then we'll work on it for a couple of years, and then we'll go. So he thinks that the future might look something like that, and that is exciting. I think I mean, I'm definitely seeing some element of that in the sort of creator industry as well. Collaboration projects here and there. You're working with these brands, and then you're kind of out. So it is kind of interesting how a small team or yourself, you can be very self-sufficient in kind of navigating what a 9 to 5 would look like.
I think that's very interesting. I love the analogy with Hollywood. I also love the term atomization of work, because that I think that's very apt. That's definitely something that we're seeing happen more and more. And yes, Hollywood is a rich industry, not as rich as games, folks. Games is still better. But in terms of the money that they make and the models that they have, it's interesting. And it's interesting because, like, for me, as somebody that works with the games and game companies a lot, it's also interesting to look at the difference between models, because game companies do not have the gig model yet, even though, at least they don't admit it, even though usually what it is, title gets shipped, AAA title gets shipped, and then a lot of designers are going to be let go, and then they come back for when the next project comes back. So in the games industry, it's more like then you cycle from Ubisoft to Electronic Arts, and you cycle in between the bigger companies. So you work for that company on that game, then after the game you get let go, you go to the next company, and by that you can also level up and get a higher salary and stuff like that. So it's a weirder model. It's not more gig based, but it's like it's more hire and fire. So you work for that company on a stint, then you go to the next, and you kind of keep going up or leveling up that way if you get lucky. I mean, otherwise not. But so that's sort of the difference. And I think, yeah, looking at it more as in like, okay, the human is the talent, and we just pull the talent, and it's different in terms of contracting when we need it, might actually be a more economic model for companies to get stuff done. It might also be an interesting thing for us as individuals to kind of shape our individual work as a company, to specifically to come back to this idea that we're going into the era of agentic AI. Like, one of the things to know is, once you wrap your head around that, and I think the announcement was yesterday that OpenAI now introduced timed queries and tasks, kind of like Zapier. So it's rolling it out right now. It's the first step towards agentic AI. Is essentially you can trigger queries and things, and so you can start automating stuff with ChatGPT now. So this is already the first step. Now the next step will be probably that projects start talking to each other. Like, we've already seen the projects, as in like queries that live separately, and now it goes back and forth between those with, of course, the human in the loop. Human always needs to be in the loop. This is also something that people that are full automation don't get. Like, there's still this quality level of having the human in the loop and checking things and editing stuff and being able to provide some feedback there, that I think is super important and is going to be part of the conversation. But yeah, to come back to this idea of workforce, definitely the individuals are more empowered if they can have automated scripts, as in like AI agents, that are going back and forth between some of these projects that they have to work with, and then they get that feedback, which is kind of wonderful.
Yeah, yeah. I can't wait to play around with that kind of stuff. I'm gonna take a hard right turn or left turn, whichever way we want to turn. Up to you
Okay.
guys. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And just before we go to the Q&A, I know we have some questions here that I'm keen to answer. Let's quickly talk about the purpose of this live stream. Where is it? Okay, here we go. I think it's somewhere here. So, guys,
Yes.
this live stream is intended to raise money for the folks who have lost their homes in the LA wildfires. An estimated 88,000 people in LA are under evacuation from these fires, and 12,000 structures have already been destroyed. And given the news that I just saw about the 65-mile-an-hour wind speeds, that's probably going to be more, and the evacuation area is definitely going to spread, right? So you can donate right now to one of the families, which is right here. That's handy. By scanning this QR code in the top left. And the suggested donation is $25, but you can give what you can. It's really up to you. And this will go directly to the families affected. So scan that QR code, or I've left a link somewhere in the comments. So you just scroll up and you'll find it. I would also flash one on screen if I can. And you can just scan that there. But it will always be on screen. So thank you very much, guys, for helping out and just sending our love to the families in LA going through such a crazy time. I know a lot of people are. And if that is that GoFundMe is all filled out, I also have another link, but let's get it to that family first as a priority. So now I want to take some questions from the folks that have been so patiently waiting and just kind of yelling at us in the comments, which they do very nicely. So the first question is, okay, if this isn't around AI, it's still okay. We'll just try and help folks as much as we can. As a junior designer, I'm trying to find design skills that will be the most in demand in the future. With Gen AI automating parts of the design process, which skills should future designers invest in, i.e. research? Question mark. I think this is one of your fans, i.e. research.
Trigger me like that. Of course you should invest in research. Just kidding. No, but like there's really nothing that replaces critical thinking. AI can do like O1 and the $100 O1 Pro models or whatever. They cannot do critical thinking. They can do advanced reasoning, right? Like reasoning, absolutely, reasoning works well. Critical thinking they cannot do. So one of the most in-demand skills for the foreseeable future will, of course, be critical thinking. Now, guess what makes you a critical thinker? Research is actually a good way to get to that level. So, yeah, critical thinking is definitely one of the things that you should cultivate. Questioning the status quo, questioning things that you're faced with, investigating things, having that investigative mindset, being curious about facts and what are facts, where do they come from? And I don't mean this in the sort of Trump kind of way where it's just like we don't like facts, but more in the way where it's just like, okay, let's be critical about something and see, is there another side of the coin that we can look at, that we can put the facts to the test? Don't just reject the facts, but question everything with a little bit of curiosity to see if you can find some answers that are similar or question some of that. So that's sort of a core skill. So some of these bigger picture skills, the strategic skills, they will not go out of fashion with AI. They will still be important, and that'll be good skills to invest in. So yeah, like these are skills you get in grad programs at the university and anything that does sort of research stuff for it. If you don't want to, spend part of your life at the university and like invest 2 to 3 years in getting an advanced degree, then I think the best skill that you can cultivate is adaptability. And that means just like learning the core principles behind these tools and the core principles behind AI as well. So you can do that with self-study, with YouTube videos and other things, where you're trying to understand, okay, so what is actually the thing that's happening here? AI is the word prediction model, like LLMs. When I say AI, I mean generative AI in this case. So LLMs, those are word prediction models-ish, right? So you're essentially predicting an outcome based on the input that you feed it. And so you got to know that to understand what's actually going on there. This is not actually a conversation. This is a prediction in terms of what the best possible answer is given the query that was put in. And it's usually a very good prediction. And sure, if you're a philosopher, you can go like, but how is that different from having a conversation? Because when you're talking to a human, they're also just predicting what they would answer based on the input that you give them. So we get a little bit philosophical there. But it's still, I think, an important thing to keep in mind as you're kind of interacting with these things, to know you're not actually talking, you're querying a model. It's a structured query that's happening here. And you have to keep that in mind. Specifically, and this was it's not as bad anymore now because we got Perplexity, we got web search and ChatGPT. We got Gemini lets you validate the sources. So we're getting to a stage where we're getting better at checking the output. But specifically at the heyday last year at the beginning, there were so many people that are just trusting, and you still see a lot of that AI slop, unfortunately, on LinkedIn, where it's just too easy to just query AI to like 5 tips, like give me the 5 best tips for X. We've all done it, but usually the tips are shit. Sorry, they're just like the most average, most common, most nonsensical. The problem is this fares really well with an audience that is just like, yeah, I love that stuff because it's like what I would have thought of course, because it's the most generic thing. But will it advance your thinking? No, it will not, right? So when I say critical thinking, this is part of critical thinking, understanding what are better, good questions to ask about the design process, about improving certain things, and holding yourself accountable to asking these questions and then improving your skills accordingly is the best guide. So, do not take AI as your teacher. Take AI as a sparring partner, as somebody that you can discuss an idea with. Do not think AI is going to be the thing teaching you something. It can help you and put you in the right path, but the learning still has to come from validated sources. So do not ever toss out the validated sources just because AI gives you the quick answer. Sure, it'll be fascinating how quickly you can even diagnose something if you put it into ChatGPT. It's faster than going to WebMD with a Google query, but even with WebMD, which is where, by the way, usually the source where some of those diagnoses come from, if you put it in ChatGPT, you'd still have to verify, is that actually based on a research paper or something? And a lot of people just don't have the time. So take the time to verify the validity of things, because in a world where information becomes a commodity, accurate and true information will be a huge advantage for anyone, right? So cultivate that skill.
Done for that. Okay, let's, Lisa, your question is cut off, but let me see if I can see it here. What are your suggestions for the different prototyping phases for getting user feedback for a passion project? No funding, but hoping to get it as far as possible, from using more of a basic tool like Figma prototype to a no-code AI prototyping tool and eventually deploying a product. What are some suggestions here, Lennart?
Yeah, so I love this idea. This is actually something our students face all the time. There's no money there. There's no, a lot of the stuff is partial. Well, it's maybe not a passion project, maybe it's just a class project, but it could also be a passion project. A lot of them are working on their portfolios and their prototypes. And so, yeah, that can be seen the same as a passion project. So getting initial feedback, the kind of idea of guerrilla feedback, that you're trying to get the product out and get it in front of real users, and not a lot of them quickly, and getting some feedback. You can use the Nielsen idea of heuristics, right? Like heuristics, expert reviews, a really very simple discount usability method that you can use, where you only need 5 to 7 users to get some of the biggest picture things fixed. So build a prototype. Even, you can either build it with Figma, or like I said, you can take it from Figma into something like Windsurf or Cursor, or even Bubble, right? Like make a Bubble no-code app, something like that. just so it's interactive. And it, again, think vertical slice. This is also an interesting thing, is you don't need to have the full thing. It's not broad. Vertical slice means one piece of functionality of your app that you actually want to get feedback on. That's usually the best kind of testing. That's how games are being developed, by the way. You just take one level, one specific level with a jumping mechanic, for example, and then you test that mechanic, because that's going to be the core mechanic of, let's say you're building Mario, right? So you're just going to test that level of the jumping mechanic and see if it works well. And you test that with like 50 people or whatever in game development. And then you get that feedback. You don't test like, all the different suits in Metroid or the different cannons that you get or whatever. Like each of these are vertical slices that you would test separately. So the same is if you have a tool, let's say it's a weather app or something, you want to just test it like for one specific location and just test the way the weather is displayed or whatever. And to do that, usually just go to a cafe. You can just sit there. It's, the J.K. Rowling style of creation. You go to a cafe, you work on the app, and you just kind of go up to people. Yeah, sure, you have to kind of overcome your fear of checking in with people. Most people are relaxed when they're in a cafe. Thankfully, we're not in COVID anymore, as different times now. Again, you can talk to people in public and just, be nice about it. But this is what happens usually. And on the one hand, you could offer them an incentive, buy them a coffee, or give them a bonus card of that cafe that you're in, give them like a $10 bonus card or something like that. Doesn't have to be much money, but just be like, hey, can I have just like half an hour of your time? Here is what you could get. I'd really appreciate your feedback. Some people might do it for free. Some people might do it for a small fee, but you just need 5 to 7 people and you already have enough feedback to be developing a more polished tool. So that's what I would recommend if you're cash strapped and you're just trying to, get it out there and get some feedback in. That's the best way to do it. Just do some expert review, heuristics kind of thing with the app and yeah, get it polished. Oh, you are muted, I think.
Am I unmuted now?
Yes, you are. Now you're unmuted.
All right. So my, like always, there are some interesting technical difficulties on my end.
We've made it this far. That's pretty good.
Yeah. Okay. So let's go to the next question. I think I can click on this. My mouse is like lagging, so I have no idea if it would actually work. Let me just click on it. This is very dangerous for a live event. Oh my god, what's going on now? Okay, here we go. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Great insights on AI. Can you share some tips on conducting user research that aligns with business goals in a startup project? This research is more focused on internal users, as designers have limited opportunities to work directly with end users. So just research tips within the startup context.
Yeah, this is, first of all, kudos for actually doing some user research within a startup, because a lot of the times that's the first thing that gets cut from the budget. But I think one of the things, again, is rapid feedback testing. So one of the methods that we have in user research called RITE, Rapid Iterative Testing and Evaluation, RITE. It's a really cool method. Background, I think, also comes from the games area. Michael Medlock and some of these other folks from Games User Research were definitely pioneering that at Microsoft. And so one of the ideas behind that method is you just need one user, and one user needs to find one issue. And then you pretty much pick anyone in the company, and ideally you want to have stakeholder on board. So you want to have the senior manager or whatever being okay with you doing that, because you're going to go through people in the company pretty quickly. But you want to have the authority to make changes. So you need sign off from management. You need a developer as well, or if you're the developer, if you're doing it with AI or whatever, you need the ability to address the feedback right away. So the way that works is you go in. You get one user to test your product until they find an issue. Once you have that issue, you stop the test right there. No further testing needed. You go fix that issue, and you go to the next user, and you have them in front of that product until they find the next issue. And you fix that issue really quickly. So the turnaround can be like 2 to 3 issues per day, even if you're quick enough in terms of turnaround. If it's a larger thing that you're testing, you might just go through 1 issue per day. But it can all be done internally. It can all be done with people not directly on your team. So if they already know the product, it's not really valuable because they already know the issues and whatnot. But if you have people that are removed from the dev team that are not really aware of the interaction path, the red routes, as we call them, in the product, then this is the perfect way to test it. You can get anyone else in the company, get their feedback internally, and quickly fix that feedback. So it's a quick way to do internal testing. It's, of course, you don't need to pay them because they're in the company, so it's also super cost efficient. Yeah, so it's just one of the ways that you could do really rapid testing. And then again, if you work with AI, it's even quicker. Or if your developer works with AI, they can probably, if you have a skilled developer, this is the thing. Windsurf and Cursor are empowering developers even more than they empower no-code people, because developers already know kind of the direction where to go, and so they just like being able to query that like are really becoming so much quicker. So having a dev that uses an AI assistant to fix the issue, they can probably have the turnaround in half an hour to an hour. That's how quick this can be, right? So unless it's like a super internal thing. And so this really enables rapid iterative testing and feedback, the right method. So definitely try that out, and hopefully it'll work for you.
Awesome. Thanks for that. I just learned a new method, so that was cool. Yes, I'm gonna take that one. Well, I think we are out of time, Lennart, and I know you have a busy schedule today, and we're already over time. So before we let you go, just want to say thank you. Before going, is there anything that you would like to plug? Product, services, accounts, whatever it is. The stage is yours.
Yeah, thanks so much. So, of course, if you like this kind of stuff and you kind of want to get a little bit smarter about research and things, I do have a newsletter that you can subscribe to. So if you go to go.lennartnacke.com/newsletter, it'll get you right onto that newsletter. I do have this games user research book behind me. So if you are interested in games user research, do feel free to, here we can see it, check out this blue book from Oxford University Press. It will, even if you're not in games user research, has a great overview of a lot of user research methods that you can use in other contexts as well, that can make that really useful for you. And last but not least, I also sometimes run little prompts and pop-ups specifically for UX designers on lennartnacke.com. So check out my website, check out some of the writing that I've done there. And if you really want to go deeper, I'm also developing a course for UX designers. So if you want early access to that, just send me a DM on LinkedIn or on X or any of the other platforms that I'm on, and just ask for the course, and I will work with you to get you early access to that. Okay, that's about it from my end. I am looking forward to more discussions in the future. We are, silent plug here, also working, this is, I don't know if I should announce this yet, working on a book for designers using AI. So we are in major negotiations right now with a traditional publisher, and the book will come out next year. So excited about that as well. If you want updates about that, just hop on the email list where I will definitely announce that too.
Awesome, man. That's very exciting news. Okay, cool. I will also after this conversation, I'll drop a link in the thread. So if you come back to this conversation, just have a look at that. I'll also leave it on YouTube. And this is recorded. So once the event is over, you can watch the full thing, skip through the bits that are interesting to you. So don't worry, someone just asked that. So of course we are recorded. Oh, yep, you've got it there. Yeah.
That's my newsletter. If you're on that, I'll make sure there's a question at the beginning. Do you care about games or UX? And then if you answer yes, I'll sequence you into the UX funnel.
Perfect. Okay. Well, thank you very much, man. I'm going to take you off stage while I do the final wrap up, but really appreciate you joining us. And I think, there's so much more we can talk about, hence us running over time.
Always.
But, we should do this again sometime. But thank you very much. Give me 2 minutes to wrap up, and I'll join you after I get off air.
Sounds good. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, man. All right. So we are doing non-stop events this week. All the design creators in this picture and also more, from teaching designers how to get hired and how to make money, including portfolio presentations, case studies, storytelling, whiteboarding, managing side gigs, salary negotiation, and conversations like this about AI with industry leaders, design execs, professors, and some of the best course creators on Maven. So this live stream's purpose And why we're doing this as a group of designers is to raise money for people who've lost their homes in the LA wildfires. We'll be making thousands of dollars worth of design secrets and content absolutely free. So please give what you can this week, and hopefully we'll be doing this next week. So to donate, you just need to scan that QR code in the top. I've also left a link in the chat. Let me make this QR code again a bit bigger. The suggested donation amount is only $25, but please give what you can to help the families out, and your funds will go directly to the families affected. Again, directly to the families affected. Scan that QR code or hit one of the links in YouTube or LinkedIn. And with that, I host these lives every couple of weeks, but actually the next live would be, if I just pop that there, next week on how to break into design in 2025 with Florian, a staff designer and founder. So if you're into this, then tune in next week around the same time. You can find it on LinkedIn or YouTube. There's a link somewhere. So if you're interested, hunt that down. But again, I just want to prompt you guys to don't follow me. Scan this QR code and help some of the people that really need your help. All right. That's about it. I've dropped that link there. If you're looking for further programming, either follow Hang or Lex, or just click on one of the links. I'll also paste it again. It's a Luma link, so you can check out some of the other really cool events that are happening this week and next for designers raising money for the LA fires. So again, guys, thank you so much for joining and so much for helping out, and whoever that donated, really appreciate you helping out there. But until next time, I'll see you on the other side. Bye. This is the design of everyday people.